Okay, here we go. I want to welcome everybody to the newest episode of the podcast, Relationships Today. I am your host, Kevin Kishor, author of Chocolate Covered Frenchfries, a recipe for any relationship. My publicist says that on these videos, which obviously this is a podcast, so most of it's not videos, unless you're watching this on YouTube or seeing a clip on Instagram. She said, I need to show you my book. So watch for the picture showing up on here at some point. Want to wish you all a happy new year. This is the first podcast of 2021. And what a year 2020 was, right? I don't have a guest on today because I promised myself that every once in a while I was going to do a little rant by myself just to kind of sound off on what I'm thinking and to connect with you guys one-on-one, and so to speak. So here I am today. 2020 gave us lots to think about, and that's what this podcast is about. It's my 2020 rant. But I'm going to try and take it in a little different direction than what maybe you guys might expect. So, first of all, I want to thank you all for following the podcast, people who have been on the show already, and I'm looking forward to new people this year coming on. I love having the guests on. It just brings a different dynamic. You know, I used to blog, and I used to vlog by myself. And I think this is by far my favorite format, is to have guests on. So if you want to be a guest on the podcast, definitely send me a message. Looking forward to hearing all different types of perspectives about real relationships today. So back to 2020. I just want to, I kind of want to say thank you to 2020, which is weird. I know. 2020 was a crazy year, I think, for everybody. It was definitely devastating for me. A lot of people know that I went through some really hard stuff this year, and I'm not going to get into details about it because the people who are closest to me know about that stuff. But, I want to talk about, as we start this new year, when we're thinking about where we're going now in 2021, I don't want to talk about necessarily how bad COVID was for this year, or quarantine, or even New Year's resolutions. I think New Year's resolutions are great. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for goals. All goals are super important. I want to talk about learning, though, because I think for me, that was like the biggest lesson for 2020 is, what could I learn from the things that I experienced? And so I guess that's my challenge or invitation to you. If you haven't looked at it that way, that maybe you could try that. For me, like I said, a lot of devastating things. I had to make some hard decisions. Like, I had to move. My business was impacted, like my other business. And hopefully, short-term sacrifices for long-term gains. I realized that I am maybe more resilient and willing to be more practical than I thought I was. But that is also a part of checking my ego, I realized. And so that's an exercise that I try to do on a regular, is that when I'm making decisions or how I am in relationships, I'm trying to see, is my ego at play here right now, like stopping me, my pride or whatever, from doing maybe what I need to do, maybe what I don't want to do. And I had an old friend. He's a wise man, I call him. He's quite an older gentleman, so I don't think he'd be even watching this. He's probably not on Instagram or anything like that. But he was always an important dude in my life, in my previous career. And he used to talk about crisis or opportunity. And I think this whole year has given us opportunities to see things as either crisis or opportunity, if we could see them that way. Also, he used to say sometimes exactly where you don't want to go through is where you need to go in order to experience the growth. So sometimes that happens to us, by circumstance. We just don't have a choice. We have to go through whatever it is that we're going through. Other times we make a choice. We could maybe dodge it, or we could, meet it head on, right? So as a coach, I realized that one of the things that I need to do is to try and take my own advice. Can I practice what I preach? And that's always a challenge for me. It's a lot easier to help other people or to suggest things to other people. I'm sure you would agree with me, no matter what profession you're in or no matter what we're talking about. But to do it ourselves can be hard sometimes. So when we go back to the learning thing, like I said, I'm not going to get into specifics, but many of you know, for example, I was engaged a year ago, and about that, and that ended, and I'm not going to get into details, like I said, but yes, it was devastating. Yes, it was hard. It impacted me, but I learned a lot about myself. Amongst all the other things that happened this year, I learned about myself. I had to take a step back, and I had to really evaluate, certain things. So in relationships, for example, I was divorced. I am divorced. I was married before, and people asked me for the first few years after that, do you ever see yourself getting married again? And I used to say, no, definitely not. I can't imagine. I spent half of my life married. Now, I just couldn't envision it. And then I went and got engaged. And so I thought to myself, the learning there for me was that even though it didn't work out, was that maybe I could do that again, something that I didn't think about myself a year ago or a year and a half ago or whatever it was. I definitely learned that about myself. So maybe I don't need to be afraid of that, right? I learned a lot about just myself in general, about, jumping into things or jumping out of things, or, commitment or not commitment. And I think that applies to a lot of things in our life, like how we deal with our impulses, how we stay disciplined to certain things, how we let fear or not dictate, how we choose to move in certain situations. So anyway, that's just one example. And obviously I could go into great detail about it and, about all the little things I learned about myself through that and how I dealt with, the real hard part of that experience. But that's not really what this podcast is about. It's really just about, are we reflecting? So most of the time when the new year changes over, we're always looking forward. And I'm looking forward to, believe me, I don't want 2021 to be like 2020, trust me. But, in my book, I do mention that whole like rowboat thing. Like we can't see where we're going, but we could see where we've come from, like when we're rowing in a rowboat, or we could see where we are at the moment. And so, yeah, we can plan ahead, or we can look to the future, and we can manifest, and walk in certain ways. But I also think it's really important to look at where we've come from and see what we could take from that, right? And so everything in the past is not always bad. There's a lot of good memories. Like this year, there were probably a lot of good memories for people, right? Like for me this year, I published the second edition of my book, came out. That was great. I launched this podcast. That was great. Amongst other things, there were good things that happened. I went through like rehab for my body for an accident that I was in last year, and I'm starting to feel stronger again. Those working with the trainer, that was great. Like there were a lot of great things that happened this year, And those come back to relationships with ourselves, right? Which ultimately impact how we can have relationships with other people. Because if we're not good with ourselves, we know we're not good for anybody else. So, long story short, this podcast is all about learning. Can you learn? What have you learned from 2020 going into this new year? And what is it that is going to impact how you go forward, really, about yourself? Now, maybe it's not just one thing. Like I said, like for me, I learned a lot about myself this year. My business was impacted. Like I said, my physical health was impacted because of last year. My mental state was impacted because of my previous relationship. My emotional state was impacted. My spiritual life has been impacted too. I mean, I know a lot of people are feeling this craziness. Like, it's hard to understand that we can go to the clubs or the bar. Well, not the clubs are closed, but we can go to like a pub or a restaurant, but we can't go to church. Now, I know not everybody's into church, but like for us, for example, like for me and my kids, usually we go to church Christmas Eve and then we have dinner. And even that, like the idea of, like just thinking about what would people be like snitching on me if all my kids, I have 6 children of my own, from my previous marriage, I have 6 kids. And so if we all got together and then maybe if they brought their significant other, it would look like a party, at my place, right? And people are going to call the authorities and say, oh, these guys are having an illegal gathering or whatever, right? So that mixed with the disconnect from maybe a spiritual community, and not just like at Christian communities, but I think in any spiritual community, it's been hard for people. Like, people can't gather to worship in general, even just to do things like other spiritual practices that often you would do in a group, like yoga, for example. It's I know a lot of people that they couldn't, like a lot of places couldn't offer classes, and people see that as a spiritual practice. So it was a hard year for everybody. Can we learn from it? I hope so. That's my goal. I hope that it's your goal too. And I would love to hear, like just create this conversation going forward. I'd love to see comments or get messages from you. And maybe it will help like direct where the future podcasts go, just hearing from different people, what things that you've learned in 2020. I've definitely learned something about this part of my business, like the relationship coaching side, based on experiences and conversations I've had with people, things that are going to come out of it. Just a watch for that. Like I'm definitely going to launch a course coming up soon, or whatever you want to call it, like a webinar or a masterclass or whatever, around some of the things that have been coming up for me and with other people. And I want to hear from you guys though, and I'm looking forward to talking with some of my guests that will be coming up this year, and just, building the podcast. Ultimately what it's about, this whole brand around my podcast and books and all that. And of course there are 2 more books that are coming, in the future. But the whole point is let's be real. And let's talk about the things that, maybe we just don't have a venue to talk about as often, like our relationships. Not necessarily to complain about our relationships. It's about what's really happening for people and what can we do to be better. That's the goal. Let's be better, and if that means sometimes taking a hard look at ourselves or learning from things that we didn't want to learn from or that we didn't anticipate that we were going to need to learn from, hopefully that's the lesson of 2020. Going into 2021, I wish you guys the best for all your goals and your resolutions this year. I hope that all those things make you a better you so that you can be a better we, whoever you're attached to, whether it be kids or spouses or friends, or just being a better employee or a boss or whatever it is. That's my wish, my prayer for everybody. I hope that we can have some faith going into this year that things are going to be better. I know there's a lot of questions still around what's coming up with the, the vaccines, and will we be able to travel again? And, we'll be able to do sports, we'll be able to, all those things, and realistically, we can only take it one day at a time. Our only choices are to kind of see what comes down the line from the government and the health authorities, or our workplaces, or whatever it may be, or to protest and revolt. And I'm not suggesting you do anything. I'm suggesting that we all check ourselves and our conscience and where we can stand and what we can live with and whatever. All I would ask is that people do whatever you do with respect. If you're protesting, do it in a way that's not unfair to the people who are just trying to do their jobs and doing what they have to do in order to put food on their table. So the system sometimes it feels like it's broken, and I get that, but it's not usually the fault of the people on the front line. So let's just do our best to spread more love this year and navigate the situation best we can together. And don't forget a lot of the things that we were working for before. It was just an amazing year. We had Black Lives Matter, then we had the whole discussion around all lives matter, blah blah blah. Of course all lives matter. It's just that's a movement that's happening and still happening, and it's been a long time coming. It's the same kind of thing that I'm talking about. Like, can we just be respectful to people and their experiences? A lot of people are fighting for a voice right now. People who are like indigenous people have been fighting for a voice for as long as I know. Black people, especially in the U.S., which is, where this movement really grew out of, they've been, their experience is very particular. And not to say that Black people all over, I mean, I live in Canada, that our experience isn't similar, but the U.S. has a particular history that they're trying to undo. So, the women's movement has been going on, it's not that old. Like, women are still underpaid in the workforce. There's still, like things like that. So, whether you're, a fellow Black person, whether you're an anti-masker, whether you're someone who's fighting for their faith to be able to worship, whether you're an indigenous person, you're a female, whatever it is, let's try and do it with the most respect that we can. Let's try to be the best version of ourselves that we can, and hopefully that's going to rub off on other people, and people will start to do the right thing, and that maybe we can change the systems that need to be changed, like one step at a time, one brick at a time, by linking arms. Instead of in anger, let's do it in love. I know that sounds like floaty and whatever, like all rainbows and unicorns, but my goal, I want to spread more love. I don't know about you, so I'm not going to be on here trying to spit anger and hate at anybody for anything, whether I disagree with it or not. There's a proper way to go about it, or there's a way that's beneficial or not beneficial. So that's my rant for 2020. I hope that what you really got out of it was, what can we learn about ourselves going forward in 2021? Can we work towards our goals with love and respect, and be the best version of ourselves so that we can impact other people in the best way possible? Stay tuned for the next podcast episodes. Please subscribe, share with your friends. Relationships Today, it's on all your favorite platforms, and the link is in my bio for the book and for the ebook and the YouTube channel, my past blogs, all that stuff. But mostly the podcast is the one for you if you're into that, to subscribe and share. And let's have the best possible relationships that we can today. Peace and love coming from Canada. I'm out. Talk to you soon.